I would like to also talk about what I call Tier 2 intervention in mathematics. In previous videos, I've actually described what it looks like to have a Tier 1 intervention, which is part of how Tier 1 intervention is really how I, as a math teacher or a teacher of mathematics, actually kind of change up my instruction during the lesson in order to provide support, scaffolding support, advancing support for the students during the lesson. It's part of the formative assessment process and the way I use whole and small group discourse to do that, and that's great. And for a lot of kids, that'll be sufficient. They'll be able to do the practice problems, no problem. They'll be able to participate and progress forward just fine. But for other students, it's not sufficient. You know, even with that and all your best efforts in your lesson design, that may not be sufficient. So what is really critical is that your collaborative team at a grade level, with the help perhaps of your principal. I think sometimes Tier 2 interventions require school-wide help and support. It can't just be, the burden can't fall on the individual teacher. But a Tier 2 intervention in mathematics, in order to be effective, is really just think of it as, how do we provide some additional time during the student's normal day to provide additional support in mathematics, so that if there are specific standards in which they are not yet proficient, we can start to get them there before they exit this grade level or this course. And what's really critical is that you may or may not have heard in what I just said was if there are certain standards in which they're not proficient. So that means we're measuring their progress not based on a grade, but based on proficiency on a standard. And so the best way I can describe this is, let's say midway through a unit or at the end of the unit, at some point in time in a unit's progress in mathematics, we determine that certain students are not yet proficient in a standard. Then what we're going to do is give them an intervention, some kind of support that has these elements, and this is really important. Number one, it's required. So it's not an option. You are going to go get this help. You've fallen behind on these standards, we're going to get you help. And that's so it's not just an invitation for help. We're gonna expect you to, we're gonna, I don't know, take you away from recess, take away half your lunch. We're gonna do something though to get you some additional help. Two, it has to be standard driven. So for example, if you came into Stevens, you came into our school district and you looked at all our interventions that go on in mathematics, you'd smile a little bit, because what you would see in our intervention room and where we're helping kids in our tutoring room and so on, you're going to see a table there, a circular table there, a table, and on the top of the table will be a stanchion with the title of a standard. And so the kids who need help on a standard all go to that table and they get help by standard. And that's really important. Most math intervention is just sort of help. Oh, you don't know your times table, so get help. Oh, you don't know how to add fractions, so go get help. Oh, you don't know how to solve a linear equation with fractions, so you go get it. In other words, it tends to be, there's just this generalized help. We want the help to be very specific to standard, and standards that we're currently teaching that you're not proficient in. Now, if that help requires some underlying skills, fine, we'll develop that. But you're going to go get help for that specific standard. And then as soon as you're proficient in that standard, you don't have to have the help anymore. So this is an aspect of intervention that we call fluidity, or it's fluid. In other words, I'm not as a student locked into it forever. Once I show you that intervention has been successful, I then don't need to have it anymore. So I'm allowed out of the intervention. So I think those are really critical elements. The other thing I really like about, I think, some of the best interventions in math can be when they're shared. And what do I mean by shared? I mean shared by the teacher team. So if I'm on a team with two other people, we'll share the intervention, we'll share each other's students. So that way, a student I might be working with one standard, you're working with another standard, someone else is working with a third standard. So if a student needs help on that standard, they come see me, right, for help on that standard, no matter who their teacher is. We have a thing at Stevenson that I really like. It's called Math Coach, and so for example, it would be typical if you came to my desk area, you would see 7th grade math, because I tend to be more high school, so 7th grade math, Algebra 1, Calculus, Geometry Honors, let's say. And what that means is any student taking those courses in our school they can come get help from me in those courses because I'm a math coach for those courses. I know what's going on, I know what's being taught, I know what the standards are, I know what unit they're in, I know the assessments they're being given, and so your teacher is absent that day, fine, you can come get that help from me then. So all of our teachers say, well, they'll be math coaches for these things. In an elementary case, it might be a math coach for fractions or a math coach for whatever, because different people have different strengths. And so any student could go get help from that teacher for that. And when you share that load, it just makes everyone's job so much easier. So I want to really encourage you to think about having Tier 2 interventions that are required, that are driven by standard, the help and support's given by standard, they're fluid and flexible, and they're shared.